Okay. So I think that I'm good to go, right? Okay, inshallah. If not, let me know. Inshallah. But that's the message. Yeah. طيب. خير. بسم الله. Hope audio and video are okay. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So, inshallah, just before we start with today's hadith, and today, inshallah, just to let you know, we're going to be starting with hadith 190, so the chapter on fasting during travel. So if you're joining us, if this is your first time, I think it's a good idea just to backtrack a little bit and explain what we're doing in case this is your first time. So what we're going to be doing, inshallah, is explaining the book of fasting, or the chapter of fasting, from the book that is called Al-Ahkam. So these are hadith collected from Al-Bukhari and Muslim. The most authentic hadith that we have among us. Among sort of the whole collection of hadith, Bukhari and Muslim are the most authentic of hadith. So Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah, who lived in the 6th century, he came and he collected these hadith specifically from those two books. And we said that there's an advantage to collecting them from those two books. Why? Because they are the strongest hadith. So if you understand them, if you memorize them, and a lot of people do actually memorize them, if you memorize them, but at least if you understand them, then you understand some of the very basic and the strongest hadith related to Islamic practice. So in this, or preceding the month of Ramadan, we're focusing on the hadith related to fasting, inshallah. So we did, and if you have the soft copy with you, the PDF copy of that particular chapter, so we did hadith 183 all the way to 189. So that's what we did last time. So today, inshallah, the plan is, and Allah willing, we'll see, we'll go, inshallah, up to maybe 12:55, maybe something like that, 1 o'clock maximum, but 12:55, let's see, and then question and answer that will follow. So we'll do from hadith 190 all the way, inshallah, to hadith, let's see, where is it? 197. So that's the plan, inshallah. Let's see how it goes. And if you have questions, inshallah, all the questions will be answered at the end. So let's begin with hadith 190, okay? So you're ready? You have your material in front of you, you have your notebook, you have your tea or coffee, whatever. You're ready, right? Inshallah. So bab as-sawm fi safar. So this is a particular chapter, let's call it a sub-chapter within the one about fasting. This is about fasting during travel. But it will have other benefits, not just simply about travel. You'll find that there are many other benefits in these hadith that go beyond the issue of whether to fast when you're traveling or not. So one of the questions that we want to be answering, inshallah, today is, if I travel and it is Ramadan, can I fast or can I break my fast? And is it better to fast or is it better to break my fast? So that's an important question. And you'll find here in one hadith after the other, because I'm not going to just introduce the question, the answer. You're going to find the answer with every hadith that we visit, inshallah, plus the many other benefits that you'll see in the hadith. So even if you're not traveling or planning on traveling anytime soon, for the future, you will need these hadith. But also, there will be other benefits in it, inshallah, as you will see, that are not limited to travel. So hadith number 190. Hamza ibn Amr al-Aslami. So Sahabi asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, should I fast when I'm traveling? أصوم في السفر. And they describe him, قال وكان كثير الصيام. He used to fast a lot. So he was a person who would fast a lot. So he said, asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, should I fast while I'm traveling? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in shi'ta fasum wa in shi'ta fa'aftir. He says, if you wish, fast, and if you wish, break your fast. That is, it's up to you. Fast if you wish, or don't fast if you wish. Now, so you see some of the benefits of this hadith. First of all, the eagerness of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, that when they needed information, they went to the Prophet ﷺ because they wanted to learn their religion. And this is something that should be a model for all of us, that when you have a question, ask. Because this is the only way that you can reform and protect your practice from mistakes. It's not, well, I think that I should be doing this, or I think I should be doing that, but what is the ruling of Allah about this particular thing? What is the ruling of the Prophet ﷺ in his practice about this particular thing? Not what I think about it, because I know already what I think about this. And you already know what you think about it, but I want to know what Allah loves about this thing and what the Prophet ﷺ used to do. So that's why he asked. He could have said, God forbid, he would never do this. He could have said, well, I'm going to do whatever I want, whatever I feel like. When he said, I wanted to know what is taqwa, what is piety. I love to fast, and this is why he asked it. So another benefit from that hadith is that whenever a person is interested in something, he asks about it more. So because he loves fasting, it's just going to come up. I'm fasting, and I'm going to travel. Should I fast or should I not fast? So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ left it up to him. If you want to fast, go ahead and fast. And if you want to break your fast, go ahead and break your fast. Now, this is definitely covers voluntary fast, that's for sure. But it definitely also covers, as we will see in the other hadith, the obligation, meaning the fasting of Ramadan, or if somebody is making up a fast, and that fast is an obligation, of course, or somebody had vowed a fast, and it's an obligation on them, as we will see. So if this is an obligation, then according to this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, what can you do? He says, it is up to you if you wish fast, or if you wish, do not fast. So it tells us that both are what? Permissible. You can break your fast, or you can continue to fast if you are traveling. Now, hadith number 192. And with every hadith, inshallah, you'll discover a little bit more, and you'll know, inshallah, how to answer the question, should I fast when traveling or not? And when is fasting better? And when is iftar, breaking the fast, better while traveling? So Anas ibn Malik says, قَالَ كُنَّا نُسَافِرُ مَعَ النَّبِي صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. We used to travel. When we go on a journey with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, we used to travel with him. فَلَمْ يَعِبِ الصَّائِمُ عَلَى الْمُفْطِرِ وَلَا الْمُفْطِرُ عَلَى الصَّائِمِ. So the fasting person, would not criticize the one who had broken his fast. And the one who's not fasting would not criticize the one who is fasting. Meaning that when we travel with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of us would be fasting, and some of us would not be fasting, and we would not criticize each other. If I'm fasting, I'm not criticizing the one who chose not to fast. And if I chose not to fast, I'm not criticizing the one who had chosen to fast. And some of the benefit of this hadith. One, it tells you that when the Sahaba report something like this from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is a hadith. Because somebody might say, well, the Prophet didn't say it, they didn't say anything about it. They're simply reporting something that they used to do. They say, yes, but they used to do it when the Prophet ﷺ was alive and the Prophet ﷺ was present. So if this was a mistake, the Prophet would have commented and corrected. Since he did not do this, meaning he did not command the people who are fasting to break their fast, or did not command the people who are not fasting to fast, means that both of these things are allowed. So that's the first thing. Whenever Sahaba report something that was happening at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it means, and it must mean, that the Prophet knew about it. So it becomes a hadith. So take this as a general rule. We used to do this when the Prophet was alive. That's a general rule. Because even if the Prophet ﷺ did not personally know about it, and it was a mistake, Allah would tell him about it so that he could correct it. The fact that he did not correct such a thing makes it a hadith. It tells you also about an adab, okay, the manners of disagreement, when that disagreement is valid. So in Islam, we talked about this, not in this class, but we talked about it in another class. Disagreements in Islam, you can divide them into two types, kind of like a legitimate disagreement and an illegitimate disagreement. So the legitimate disagreement, where you have variety of opinions, but they are based on solid foundations, meaning that The person who has this different opinion in himself is qualified to have an opinion. He's a scholar or she's a scholar. Second of all, they have done their job investigating the evidence, the Quran and Sunnah. And so they come up with one opinion. Another scholar investigated and came up with a different opinion. That type of agreement, and of course, in doing that, they did not contradict something that is clear and certain in Islam. They did not contradict something clear and certain in Islam. So that type of disagreement, which they call it areas of ijtihad. Areas of ijtihad. That type of disagreement, there shouldn't be any bickering, there shouldn't be any criticism, there shouldn't be, you can go back and forth discussing the matter, that's fine. But you wouldn't attack. You wouldn't condemn. Okay? Because it's an open area of investigation. Even if you believe that what you're saying is right, but it's an open area of investigation and the other person is trying their best because A, they are qualified to try their best and you've seen that they are trying their best. There's another area, of course, where disagreement is illegitimate, where the person who's making that investigation or that judgment is not qualified to make it, or they have not put the effort. They have not put the effort. You could see that they're simply following what they like. And as it often happens, they're contradicting something clear and certain in Sharia. So that type of disagreement, in a sense, you need to be gentle, but if you criticize that person with wisdom, but if you criticize that person for that position that they have taken, it is legitimate to criticize it, not because you want to criticize the person, but because you want to criticize that opinion so that people are not fooled by it. Right? So here, with the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, both of these things are permissible. So that's their adab, is that I've chosen something here, which is, let's suppose I'm traveling with the Prophet ﷺ and I chose to break my fast. I do not feel because of that I'm better. Or that I'm traveling with the Prophet ﷺ and I chose to fast. I do not believe that I am superior to that one who had broken his fast. I don't believe that I'm better because I've chosen one and not the other, because both of them are permissible. As we will see, inshallah, there are reasons to choose this and there are reasons to choose that. So the adab there is that whenever you are practicing something in Islam, and both of these things are legitimate, and you may choose one, but remember, both are legitimate, right? You're choosing one, and your brother and your sister are choosing another. You're not necessarily better than him, you're not necessarily better than her, just because of that choice. Okay? Especially if both of these things are allowed, are permitted, and are legitimate, or at least they are areas of ijtihad. So here you'll find that they didn't criticize each other, radiyallahu anhum, and that is how they dealt with each other, and they continued to be brothers and sisters, even though the practice was different. And that's why also, subhanAllah, if you want to take this and kind of implement it today, like let's say, for instance, that Allahu Alam, how are we going to start Ramadan this year or next year or whatever, on the same day or not the same day. But let's suppose that we disagree. Let's suppose that we disagree, and I'm following this scholar and you're following that scholar and following this center and you're following that center, and we don't really have full agreement. Well, just consider that although they all fasted at the same time, of course, because they had the Prophet ﷺ as this political religious leader, but at least on that travel, some of them were fasting and some of them were eating and drinking. So there were some differences, but they're still one. So they weren't critical of each other to the degree that it caused splits. But if you have something good to say, say it, and say it in the best of ways. If you believe that somebody else is wrong, especially in this matter of when to fast, and leave it to the heads of the community, leave it to the scholars or the sheikhs of the community so that they can talk about it, but don't quibble with each other. Oh, your fast is wrong, my fast is right. Leave that, inshallah. Hadith 192. So Abu Darda says, he said, we went out during the month of Ramadan. So this is a travel that was initiated during the month of Ramadan, which tells you that you're allowed to travel during the month of Ramadan, by the way, right? So you're allowed to. So why? Because here it explicitly states that they traveled during the month of Ramadan. Because somebody may think to themselves, well, I have to fast. If I travel, I may have to break my fast. So is fasting permitted? You say yes. Why? Because of this hadith. Right? And that's, as I said, the advantage of actually connecting yourself directly to the Quran, correctly to the Sunnah, directly to the hadith, is that you have the evidence right there in front of you. Right? You don't have to look for it. It's right there in front of you. So they said that they went out or traveled with the Prophet ﷺ during the month of Ramadan at a time where it was an intense heat, a season of intense heat. And it says, to the extent that one of us would place his hand over his head in order to protect himself from the heat. And none of us was observing the fast, none of us was fasting, except the Prophet ﷺ and Abdullah ibn Rawaha. I mean, among this whole company of the Prophet and the companions, only two were fasting during the month of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ and Abdullah ibn Rawaha, meaning only two were strong enough to withstand fasting during this travel plus such intense heat. And he says, إن كان أحدنا, يعني how intense is it? لا يضع يده على رأسه من شدة الحر, meaning that because of how hot it is, they're trying to protect themselves with whatever they can from the heat of the sun, even though they're not fasting. But it's so hot and so intense that none of them could fast except two. And of course, it tells you about the physical strength and endurance and patience and taqwa of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he could continue with his fast. And it tells you that Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiyallahu anhu was also a man of strength and determination, that he could do this. But it does not diminish or take away from anybody else who was traveling with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because why? Because it is permissible, an exemption, an allowance. They call it a rukhsa from Allah Azza wa Jal, that when you travel, that you are allowed to break your fast. So it tells you here that most of them were not fasting. And the Prophet observed it, and he didn't condemn and did not criticize, which tells you that this is permissible. Now you're going to see something different, kind of like the flip of it. And all of these ahadith, when you bring them together, and that's the beauty of it, when you take one ayah of the Quran, it may give you that ayah, the whole picture, or it may want you to go and bring other ayahs. When you put all these ayahs together, it gives you the fuller picture. Same thing with the hadith. One hadith gives you something, but you may need at times, not all the time, but at times you may need to bring other hadith. And when you bring all the other hadith together, you get a full picture of how the Prophet ﷺ behaved, how the Sahaba behaved, how the ruling, what is the correct and complete ruling when it comes to any particular matter. The one we're talking about here is fasting. So this particular hadith 193, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he said, كان رسول الله في سفر. He says, Prophet ﷺ was traveling with people, of course, and he saw a crowd, people have gathered around somebody, and a man was being shaded by them. So he asked, what is the matter? Because it's just, what's the problem? What is happening? They said he's fasting, meaning that person had probably collapsed. And he's fasting, and he had probably collapsed. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْبِرِّ الصِّيَامُ فِي السَّفَرِ. He says, it's not of righteousness that you would fast during travel. It's not of righteousness that you fast during travel. And Muslim added, take advantages of the concession of Allah which he gave to you. Take advantage of the concession of Allah, which is the rukhsa, the exemption, the allowance that we talked about. Take an advantage of it that Allah Azza wa Jal had given to you. So this is famous, that statement, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْبِرِّ الصِّيَامُ فِي السَّفَرِ. It's not righteous to fast during travel. That's a famous statement. Now, what does it mean here? And why did the Prophet ﷺ say it? Well, he said it because of what? Incident that we just talked about. They're traveling, somebody is fasting, he collapses, and people are shading him and trying to protect him and maybe trying to revive him. So when the Prophet saw ﷺ the extent of hardship that that person is enduring and he had put upon himself, that's the thing. If there's any ibadah, any type of ibadah has a an amount of hardship to it, not excessive, not excessive, right? Like fasting, there's some hardship in it, but it's not excessive. Praying, salah, just your 5 daily salahs, there's an amount of hardship in it. Now, maybe calling it hardship is an exaggeration, maybe not, that's not the best word to use, but there's always an amount of effort that you need to put in order to accomplish this thing. The 5 daily prayers, paying your zakah, going to Hajj, going to Umrah. But in fact, if you think about it, anything that you want to do in life has an amount of effort in it, has hardship in it. If you want to go out and work, there's hardship in it. You want to go out and you want to lose weight, there's hardship with it. You want to buy food, there's hardship with it. So everything in life has hardship with it. So there's this amount of effort, or let's call it hardship, with every ibadah, but it's not excessive. Now Allah Azza wa Jalla has observed the capacity of human beings. So whenever this hardship, because of something that Allah had asked you to do, becomes too much, it becomes excessive, that you cannot take it anymore, where it becomes harmful for you or maybe people around you, you have that concession to stop. You're allowed to stop it and alter that practice or stop it until you reach a stage or a time or a place when it's not hard anymore. And if you cannot do it anymore, like in fasting, let's say, you wouldn't fast. Like if a person becomes sick and chronically sick, and they will never be able to fast again, then they will never fast. They pay a compensation, but they'll never fast. So here, there is an amount of hardship with fasting when you're a resident, you haven't traveled yet. When you start traveling, that adds hardship, because travel brings hardship. That adds hardship on that practice, which Allah Azza wa Jalla did not put on you. Because of that hardship, Allah exempts you from fasting and allows you, if you wish, to fast. If you wish, you can fast. If you're strong, there are other considerations, inshallah, when we talk about them, but if you wish, you can fast. And if you wish, because that's an additional hardship, and it's a temporary type of hardship, if you wish, you accept Allah's mercy and you say, I'm not going to fast. Here, this man had put so much hardship on himself that the Prophet ﷺ needed to remind them and also us by saying, it is not righteous to fast in this manner. And this is not something that you should compete to or for, not something that you should rush to do, because usually righteousness, bir, is something that you want to grab as much as you can of, reach as fast as you can. Fasting on its own is righteousness. You want to fast as soon as you can. You want to fast and fast as many days as you can. That's righteousness. But says in this situation where you're bringing harm to yourself, that type of fasting is not righteousness. And it's important to remember this, because some of us become very rigid. We say we have to fast. And you feel guilty because you've been used to it. And there's that sense, that the month has sanctity. Even if I'm traveling, it just doesn't feel right that I'm traveling in Ramadan and I'm eating and drinking. And that is a beautiful feeling to have. But at the same time, you have to understand that this is a rukhsah. So if fasting now is going to cause you too much hardship, it's going to cause you too much hardship, then it is better for you to do what? To break your fast. It's better, right? It is better for you to break your fast. And that's how scholars, when they debate this issue, Now you're traveling, and of course there is a rukhsah, concession from Allah Azza wa Jalla that you should break your fast. Now, is it better to fast or to break your fast? So some scholars have said it's better to fast. We asked them why. They said, well, you know what? If you can tolerate it, when you fast, you finish their obligation. It doesn't remain hanging. In case later on you die or whatever, at least you paid your debt. In terms of, you want to think about it as debt. You've done your job. You don't have to worry about it later. So they say that's why fasting is better. And we see in some hadith, the Prophet ﷺ himself fasted. So of course, it's not disliked. Others are saying, no, it is better to do what? To break your fast. You see, we ask them why. They say because the Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith, عليكم برخصة الله التي رخص لكم. He says, take advantage of the concession that Allah had given to you. Take advantage of the concession that Allah had given to you. Why did He give you that concession? Like Ibn Abbas had said, if somebody gives you a gift and you reject it, wouldn't you be upset? He says it's the same thing. A concession is a gift from Allah and you're rejecting it. They say also that there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, إن الله يحب أن تؤتى رخصه. That Allah Azza wa Jalla loves that you would take advantage of His concessions. So we say, of course, it's better to break your fast. Another group of scholars have said, what is best, it is what is best for you. That is, if you're traveling and it's not really hard on you, let's say that travel is short or you're healthy, and you really feel that you want to fast. And they say it doesn't harm you and you're okay with it, and you emotionally even feel better when you're fasting, so there's no harm and you feel better about it, say fast, that's better for you. In fact, because you've rushed and you performed Allah's obligation. So then that's fasting is best for you. It says, but if you are a different type of person who is not as healthy, or travel makes you sick and tired, and you're not going to feel like travel, you'll be fasting, but you're going to be hating that fast because of that hardship. And you would prefer to have broken your fast because it makes it easier on you to travel, easier on you to move around. You're not going to get a headache. You're not going to get a body ache. You're not. So also you want to, when you want to do this ibadah, you want to enjoy it as well. So if you're that type of person who's not going to be enjoying that ibadah at all, maybe be resenting it or hating it, or you're going to be bringing harm to yourself, or maybe it's going to sacrifice your ability to perform other important obligations, you say it is better for you to break your fast. We'll see in the next hadith an example. It is better for you to break your fast, and that is better than fasting, because you can make up for it later on, inshallah. So that is, wallahu a'lam, the best opinion. That is, should I fast or should I break my fast when I'm traveling? Say it depends on you. You want to fast and you're healthy and there's no extra hardship on you, maybe you can tolerate it and you can still enjoy this ibadah, fast. And no one can criticize you for it. Remember the Sahaba who chose differently? No one can criticize you for it. But if you're a person who says, no, I'm not going to be enjoying my fasting if I do it when I'm traveling, it's going to be hard on me, it's going to cause these difficulties, we'll say break your fast. And no one can criticize you for it, and you should be internally criticizing yourself for it, because you're doing something that Allah loves. And you're doing something that the Prophet ﷺ did. Some other hadith are not here. The Prophet ﷺ traveled during Ramadan and he was fasting, but because they needed to do something important during that travel, the Prophet broke his fast and commanded everybody to break their fast. So he broke his fast in Ramadan. He started his journey fasting. Along the way, he stopped and he was on his mount, on his camel, and he drank some water. And he did this so that everybody would see him, so that everybody would break their fast. So he did that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So no one can criticize you for it, and you yourself cannot criticize yourself for it, but you say, this is a concession, this is a gift from Allah Azza wa Jalla, and Allah loves that I take advantage of it, because it will give you the strength, inshallah, to continue to worship Allah later on, and you're not going to resent that ibadah. It's important also to pay attention to your, let's call it your appetite or your desire to worship Allah. Pay attention also to that. Hadith 194, he says, Anas ibn Malik, he says, we were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some of us were fasting and some of us were not fasting. So that's, we've encountered this before, right? And I think that in the early hadith. Some of us were fasting, some of us were not fasting. So he says, we got down at a place on a hot day, and the one with the most shade among us is the one with a cloth to shield himself from the sun. And this company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so ill-equipped and so poor that he says that the one who had the most to protect himself from the sun is the one who had a piece of clothes or a cloth with him that he'd be able to shade himself with it under the sun, meaning that there is nothing else to protect yourself from the sun, indicating here the severity of the climate, and indicating here how little they had with them on their travel. How very little they had with them on their travel. So it was a very difficult travel, and yet some of them were fasting and some of them were not fasting. And he says, and there were among us those who were sheltered themselves from the sun with their own hands. That's the only protection that they had, is just to put their hands up like that to protect themselves from the sun. There's nothing else. You can imagine yourself, desert, no vegetation, no trees, nothing else, and you're directly under the sun, and that's the only thing that you can do to protect yourself from that heat. Because that is very intense, and this is also how little they had, radiallahu anhum. But despite that, they were willing to sacrifice. With as little as they had, they were very willing to sacrifice to Allah Azza wa Jalla. So he says that those who were fasting collapsed, like it was natural, right? With such intense heat and with such difficult travel, they just collapsed. So those who had not observed the fast got up and pitched the tents and watered the mounts. So they pitched all the tents, they fixed the camp, and they brought water to the animals. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, those who are not fasting have taken their entire reward today. Those who are not fasting have taken al-ajr, meaning the full or most of that reward today has gone to those who had broken their fast, not to those who had fasted. Even though those who had fasted are rewarded. But the Prophet ﷺ here is making a comparison. So, of course, those who had fasted and collapsed because of it and continued until sunset, of course Allah rewarded them for that. And of course there is extra reward for it because it's a more difficult fast. But now he says, compare what they've done here, those who are fasted, to those who broke their fast. Those who broke their fast later on can make up for that day. So they haven't lost it, right? They haven't lost it. But what have they done that made the Prophet ﷺ say it's as if this entire reward today had went to those who had fasted? They've helped others. Right? They've helped them. So they took care of those who were fasting, took care of them physically, and took care of their animals and served them. And so because of that, Allah rewarded them more than the reward of those who were fasting. Yeah? Because when they helped them, and that probably includes making food for them, okay? So it's as if they've given them food to eat, so they get their reward maybe as well. Like it gets duplicated for them, right? Like the fasting person does not lose anything, but it gets duplicated for the person who's helping and offering. So it gets duplicated for them, and they're also serving them. So it tells you here about the benefit of service. If it's for Allah Azza wa Jal, it has to be for Allah, because it could be for anything else. But if you do it for Allah, to help your brother, to help your sister, to help even if they're not Muslim, but you're doing it for Allah Azza wa Jal, feeding, sheltering, giving advice, whatever it is, if you're doing it lillah Azza wa Jal, there is great reward in it, even though they haven't fasted. So our assessment here of what is allowed and what is meritorious and what is not, what has a lot of hasanat and what doesn't, and which act is better and which act is not up to us, but it's up to Sahib al-Sharia, the one who legislates, which is Allah Azza wa Jal, and to the explanation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is, sometimes you want to do two things, and both of them are good, but you can only do one at this particular time and not the other. It can't happen. Like in this particular hour, let's say, I can do this or I can do that. Well, you can't do both. You can't do both, right? Because there's no time to do both of them. Which one should you choose? You say choose the one that is more beneficial and has more rewards in it. And that could be different from one person to the other. I mean, I don't want to complicate the issue. It can be different from one person to the other. But it says that act that has more rewards and more beloved to Allah, that's the one that you choose. So here, those who had broken their fast, even though for some of us today, we could look at those who are fasting and say, those are the better people because they fasted, right? Because to us, sometimes ibadah is very limited to particular acts. Even, all right, even though Allah had allowed us not to fast on that day, but it's just we're committed to very small interpretations of what is ibadah and what is good and what is not. But if you look at two things and Allah rewards one more than the other, then rush and do the one that Allah rewards more than the other if there's a contradiction between the two, meaning you can't do them both at the same time, this or that. Right? So here what they've chosen is very significant. They broke their fast and they're allowed to, and they accepted the concession from Allah that they can break their fast, so they're going to make it up later. They haven't lost anything, and they were helping others. So of course, this is a great hadith to teach us the importance of service. But pay attention also for those who are serving others. That's important. When you serve others and when you help and all of these things, which is beautiful, at the same time, take care of your spiritual side as well, because sometimes that other side can so consume you that it could deplete your spiritual side. So if you find yourself so engaged in the service of others, feeding and helping and assisting and all of doing all of these things, which again is beautiful, but then you look at your personal ibadah and you find that it's lacking, even though you have time for it, you find that it's lacking, then you got to really balance the two, because you could be so attracted to one that you're going to forget about the other. So if you find I'm helping others, with charity, I'm helping others with organizations, I'm helping others with this and that, but when I'm alone, when I have time to read the Quran, I'm not reading it. When I have time to pray when I can pray on time, I'm not doing it. When I can fast, I'm not doing it. When I should remember Allah, I'm not doing it. I just enjoy this side, but not that side. That's an imbalance. So remember both of these things, service, but also spirituality. So those who are helping others here did not experience that type of imbalance. So I just thought of mentioning this, inshallah, in case that's something that we've experienced or we've seen. Hadith number 195. Aisha radiallahu anha قالت كان يكون علي الصوم من رمضان. She says, sometimes I miss some days of Ramadan, meaning I need to make them up. So sometimes I'd have some days of Ramadan left over after Ramadan that I need to make up. فما أستطيع أن أقضي إلا في شعبان. The only time I would be able to make up for it is in Sha'ban, meaning Sha'ban, the other Sha'ban, just before the next Ramadan. There's an addition to that hadith mentioned in Al-Bukhari and another mentioned in Muslim. It is said because of her attention to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of the attention she paid to the needs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why some days she will miss, let's say Ramadan, she'll miss some days. And then she wants to make him up after. But because of the attention that she would be giving to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she wouldn't find time to make up for it up until Sha'ban, meaning just before Ramadan. Now, some of the benefits, and there are probably a lot of more benefits in this hadith than the ones that we're going to be talking about. One is the virtue of Aisha, right, radiyallahu anha, which she cared so much for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that she would do this. Okay, so her great devotion to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes it so that every single day, right, she is paying close attention to him and to his need, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that she wouldn't be able to fast that particular day. You see, why is Sha'ban? Like, why was it Sha'ban of the other? The next Ramadan, before the next Ramadan, that's the time when she'll be able to fast. They say probably because the Prophet ﷺ would be fasting most of Sha'ban. So the Prophet ﷺ typically is fast most of Sha'ban. So this is why she will find the time, but otherwise she wouldn't. This also tells us that Qada Ramadan, making up for the days of Ramadan, is not a necessity. It's not a necessity that it happens right after. So you miss some days in Ramadan, whether you're male or female, right? And you have an excuse. It's not a necessity that it should be made up in Shawwal. But qada muwassa, meaning that you have plenty of time up till next Ramadan, up till just before next Ramadan, right? Till the coming Sha'ban, for you to fast and make up for those days. Why? because they say it's wallahu alam taken from what she said. He says that I could only be able to make it in Sha'ban, meaning that as if there's an understanding there that if I hit the next Ramadan with still some days left from the previous Ramadan, there'd be something maybe wrong with it. So this is what you should intend, inshallah. Now, if you intend it, I want to fast, but for whatever reason, right, you really have excuses and you're unable to make up for those days until the next Ramadan comes because of inability. There's nothing wrong with it, inshallah. Because of inability, there is nothing wrong with it. If it's because of neglect, let's say you could do it, but you've neglected it until the next Ramadan came, then yes, some scholars obligate that you would feed a poor person for each day. So let's say, for instance, you're left over with 5 days from last Ramadan. This Ramadan comes and you still have those 5 days and you did not make them up because of neglect. I'll do them later, and then boom, it's Ramadan. They say some scholars do obligate that you feed 5 people for those 5 days that you've missed. You still have to make them up, right? But because of that delay. So some scholars do obligate this. So this is one of the benefits of this hadith, is that it tells you that you can delay the making up for those days, but the scholars do prefer that if you have the time, do them, because you don't know if you're going to become sick later, right? And if you have the time, do it consecutively so that you'll be done with it, inshallah. In case this and that happens, it doesn't remain as a debt, it doesn't remain as a burden. I still have more days, and what do I do with them? So if you can, and if you're healthy, you have the time, rush if you can. But if you cannot, and you have here an example of a great woman, radiyallahu anha, she couldn't. And again, does not diminish you in the least. She simply couldn't. Why couldn't she? Because of her husband. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. She was taking care of him. So that actually is an honor, right? That's not a denigration in any way or diminishment in any way. So that's one benefit in this hadith. Let's see the next hadith, inshallah. So we said we'll do hadith 195 and then 196, inshallah. So 2 more hadiths, inshallah. Yeah, we're getting there, inshallah. Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, "Man mata wa alayhi siyam, sama anhu waliyuhu." He says, if someone dies and there's some fast is due from them, then their heir fasts on their behalf. Somebody dies and they still have some days of fasting left with them. Meaning what left with them? Meaning that they owe it. Not that they die, let's say, in the middle of Ramadan and they haven't finished all of Ramadan. The rest of Ramadan is not an obligation on them. No. Is that they still have some days left that they have to make up. Days of Ramadan, let's say. Okay, past Ramadan, they haven't fasted it yet. So let's say, for instance, they are in the month of Sha'ban and they still have 10 days from past Ramadan and they die. So they still owe 10 days. Or they have vowed, and we're going to come to vowing and nadr here. They have vowed that I vow to Allah that I will fast 3 days. So they made it an obligation on themselves. So they owe Allah 3 days and they die. That's what we're talking about. Days that they owe to Allah Azza wa Jal, right? So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if somebody dies and he has fasting that he owes to Allah, his heir fasts on his behalf. Now, Abu Dawood said, this applies to fasting with a man, which a man vows. And this is the opinion of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So here the scholars, like the opinion of Ahmad is an opinion of a group of scholars, and other scholars see differently. Some scholars interpret this hadith to mean what? He says, this only is in reference to days that you have vowed to fast, not days that you owe from Ramadan. Other scholars say, no, this is comprehensive of all the days that you owe and you need to make up, whether it's fasting or whether it is vowing. So let's explain this a little bit, inshallah, so it becomes clear and not complicated, inshallah. What is a vow? Vow is basically to say a nadr. It is to say, Ya Allah, I vow to fast these numbers of days. Vowing could be also what? I vow, Ya Allah, to pray these number of rak'ahs. I vow to give this much in charity. If you give me this. That's typically how it goes. It kind of like transactional phrase. Ya Allah, if you give me this, I'll do that. If you give me that, I'll do this. That's how it goes. So basically, it's something that you want, and you really want it, and you say, if Allah really gives it to me, I'll do this and this and this. Now, scholars have said, and it's accurately so, that nadhr or vowing is disliked. Is disliked, meaning do not do it. It's not haram. Okay, it's not, unless you do a vow that is a haram vow, then that is haram. Yani, I don't know. If Allah gives me this, I will steal something, right? That's haram, right? So not talking about this. Talking about a vow that is you're in compensation for something that Allah will give to you. Ya Allah, if you cure my son, my daughter, if you give me a new job, I'll fast for 10 days. I'll fast for a month. That kind of thing. They say this is disliked because you're putting on yourself an obligation that Allah did not put it on. And another thing, what do you think this is doing? Like, you're not bargaining with Allah Azza wa Jal. He's not going to give it to you because you're giving him something back. So don't put this obligation on you, because a lot of people in their enthusiasm, what they do is what? They put too much on themselves and they come back and regret it later. They really regret that later. And they come back and they say, I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. You know what? That's too much. I can't do it. So who asked you to? So don't vow. If you know people who do that, or if you're inclined to do it, don't vow and say, Allah, if you give me this, I'll do that. But if a person actually does it, okay, it becomes an obligation. You put it on yourself. It becomes an obligation. So that's what vowing is. So the opinion of some scholars is what? This hadith, that if you die and you still owe some days to Allah Azza wa Jal, then your heir can fast on your behalf. They say this is only about vowing. Okay? Promising Allah Azza wa Jal that I'm going to fast in exchange for this. So that's only the case. Other scholars say no, this is general. If there's an obligatory fast on you that you did not fast, okay? So I've missed days from Ramadan, I did not compensate. I vowed that I will fast a few days and I did not do that yet. And I die. Then I still owe this to Allah Azza wa Jal. Then the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said, Sama anhu waliyuhu. His heir fasts on his behalf. Okay, and there's another hadith that will come that will explain this, inshallah, a little bit more. So fasts on his behalf. They say now, is it an obligation on the heir? Okay, on those who inherit. Okay, is it an obligation on them to fast or not? So what some scholars have said, they've said if they inherit money, they have to fast. In a sense, what they've observed is that what? If you have inherited money from that man or that woman, meaning that they benefited you, then you have to fast on their behalf, or at least ask someone else. If you can't do it, ask someone else to fast on their behalf. Why? Because they've benefited you. They gave you something that you need to give back. So there's this connection, right? There's this blood connection, but also now what? There's monetary benefit. They benefited you, so you benefit them. But they said if you inherit nothing from them, it's only recommended, right? It is only recommended that you would fast on their behalf. It's a good idea. It's a good idea. If you know that somebody is like that, and they still have some days that they need to fast, past, right? Not present, not future. Days of the past that they need to make up and fast. They say it's a good idea that you fast on their behalf. If you cannot, you can ask somebody else to do that on their behalf. We call them ajnabi, someone who's not related to them, but he can volunteer and do that on their behalf. And some scholars have said you can feed also, but wallahu a'lam, we'll stick with fasting or finding somebody who can fast. The last hadith, inshallah, for today, hadith number 197. He said, Ibn Abbas, that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is, it will seem like it's one hadith, but two incidents, two separate incidents. He says, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, my mother has passed away, and she has a whole month of fasting left, okay, that she owes to Allah Azza wa Jal. Should I make up for it? Should I do it on her behalf? He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَكَانَ عَلَى أُمِّكَ دَيْنٍ أَكُنْتَ قَضِيهِ عَنْهَا. He says, if your mother had a debt, would you pay it on her behalf? Like money. So if she had a debt, would you pay that debt on her behalf? Would you feel obligated? Would you do that on her behalf? He says, yes. So he says, فَدَيْنُ اللَّهِ أَحَقُّ أَن يُقْضَى. He says, The debt that belongs to Allah is more worthy of being paid. The debt that belongs to Allah, or the debt of Allah, deserves more that it should be paid. In another narration, it's a woman, not a man, so it's a different. He says a woman comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says that my mother had passed away and she had vowed to fast. Should I fast on her behalf? And he said to her the same thing. He says, do you see that if your mother had a debt, would you pay it on her behalf? And if you paid on her behalf, would that be enough? Would that settle the matter? She said, yes. He says, then fast on behalf of your mother. So if your mother had a debt and you pay it, would that settle the matter? She said, yes. And he said, then fast on behalf of your mother. So two incidents, but it's basically the same idea and the answer is almost the same. My mother has a fasting that she needs to do. It's a month of fasting. Do I fast on her behalf? My mother has vowed that she would fast few days. Should I fast on her behalf? So the Prophet ﷺ here, in order to communicate this to them, employed what is called qiyas, analogy. Okay? And here this, inshallah, introduces you sort of to this internal system of the Sharia, that even the Prophet ﷺ is the one who introduced it, and then later on scholars would expand on it. But this analogy is what? Analogy is to compare one thing to the other, and they are similar. So that the ruling extends from one to the other. And this tells you, inshallah, that there is a logic to the Sharia. And I'm using the word logic here to really mean an internal common sense and system. An internal common sense and system. That's what I mean by logic here. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, okay, think about it. If your mother had a debt, would you pay her debt on her behalf? After she had gone. Now it's your money, but she's gone. But she still owes somebody something. Would you pay to compensate that person? He says, yes. He says, now this is a debt, but this debt belongs to Allah Azza wa Jal. She's still responsible, right? Now you can choose not to do anything about it, but she's responsible for it. She could be questioned about it. Now he says, now in order for you to pay that debt and release her from it, you fast on her behalf. You volunteer and you fast on her behalf as an act of ihsan, as an act of charity, as an act of birr, righteousness to your dead mother, to your dead father, that whenever you find that there's something missing, especially money, of course, they owe somebody something, especially money, and you can afford it. But also if there is dain, like this one, that belongs to Allah Azza wa Jal, you do it on their behalf, and Allah, out of His rahmah, accepts it. Because He could say, why? Right? Now, but mind you, if a person is excused, right? He has an excuse, right? Allah will forgive them. Right? If a person has an excuse, Allah will forgive them. But here, as an act of charity and ihsan and righteousness to your dead relative, is that Allah is going to accept that from you. Allah is going to accept that from you. And this is really especially when somebody vows to fast or do something, because they put this on themselves. Now we can imagine that somebody is fasting, and some scholars have said that somebody had missed some days of fasting, and he or she did not really have the opportunity to make up for that fast. None at all. Right? Allah will forgive them for that, because there's complete inability for them to make up for it. Now it would be beautiful if somebody, their son, their daughter, fasts on their behalf. Beautiful. And that's the connectedness that you will have to them even after their death. You're giving them something precious even after their death. But when somebody vows it and he puts it on himself, that's why it's not such a good idea to vow. When you put it on yourself and Allah did not put it on you, you carry that burden on you and you put it on yourself. So especially if somebody had vowed it, yes, go ahead and fast on their behalf, and that will be sufficient, inshallah, for them. But I want you also here to pay attention to this internal logic of the Sharia, because a lot of people think to themselves, like religion in general doesn't make sense. Right? It's nonsensical, right? It's all about magical thinking and fantasies and whatever. But when you actually start studying religion, and specifically studying Islam, any religion revealed from Allah Azza wa Jal, if it has still a trace of that revelation, you'll find some logic in it. Logic, again, is I'm using it as what? Common sense. Not necessarily rationalism, I'm not meaning that, but with an internal mechanism that makes a lot of sense. Now, when you look at Islam, because in all of it, in its totality, it was preserved. When you go in, you will find it to be very logical. And this is one evidence of it. That is, the Prophet ﷺ had looked at one part of it and he said, do you understand how this makes sense here? He says, yes. He says, and that's how it makes sense over here as well. So it's congruent. All right? It makes sense in all of its different parts. They work together. And that's evidence for using analogy. When it's used appropriately, that's evidence for using analogy. And that's also evidence for the Prophet ﷺ teaching it, inshallah. And they say the last thing here, inshallah, فَدَيْنُ اللَّهِ أَحَقُّ أَنْ يُقْضَى, the debt that belongs to Allah, or the debt of Allah deserves more attention, is that some scholars have said that if a person dies and they still owe zakah and they still owe human debt, which one comes first? So some scholars put zakah first because that is the right of Allah Azza wa Jal. Then comes human debt. Allahu A'lam. So I think inshallah we'll stop here. It's a good place to stop. Bismillah. It's 1 o'clock, and we'll see inshallah if you have questions. I'll be glad to take them.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Ali. May Allah bless you and your family, and may Allah bless everyone who has attended this lecture.
Ameen.
So we have lots of questions, Sheikh. Just before I get to the questions, this video is recorded, so please spread the word. We have 2 more Sundays, inshallah. Sheikh is on schedule, so if we go to the 3rd Sunday, he'll let us know.
Inshallah.
Do register to get the soft copy of the hadith in Arabic and English. And if you have any more questions, please email. And I believe I've not confirmed that Sheikh can try to answer at the beginning of the next class if you don't get to it today, inshallah.
Inshallah, we can do that. Inshallah.
So we'll go by order that I have received both on Facebook as well as Zoom on our computers. So the first question is from Sister Samia. And she talks about, there was a narration, Sheikh, that you mentioned that the Prophet started to fast and then broke his fast by drinking water in Ramadan. Is there any kafara to pay in this case?
Not at all, not at all. Because the kafara is only when you are not exempted to fast, or you are allowed to break your fast because, let's say, for instance, you cannot fast. You cannot fast. You're old and you cannot fast. You have a chronic illness and you cannot fast, but there is no such kafara. If you are sick, let's say, for instance, you become sick, you start fasting and you become sick and you can't continue. You break your fast and that is rukhsa. There's no kafara at all for it, no fidya. You start traveling and you're allowed, and that's what it is, you're allowed. And so because you're allowed, then there's no kafara, because you're going to go back and fast later. The only time where you're going to be paying something is when you cannot fast anymore. That's when you're going to be paying something.
Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. So any of the questions that the Sheikh answers, if the participant believes that the question is not answered,
yes, please.
Please do put your hand up or answer or ask again. We will let you have the floor as well.
Inshallah.
So the second question is about voluntary fasting, related to voluntary fasting. It's from a sister. And she's saying she's planning to do a voluntary fast, but she's not comfortable without sahur. Ends up oversleeping, misses sahur. Can she break her fast and fast another day instead?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because a voluntary fast, they call it amiru nafsika. You're kind of like, you have the final say. Like you're the emir. You're the emir. You can decide to continue with that fast or to cancel it. And there's no compensation at all for it, meaning that you don't need to feel guilty that I need to make it up. Yeah, no, if you want to, out of good discipline and habit, that if I break something, I want to do it. It's a good idea, but don't feel obligated, right? Don't feel obligated. There's nothing to pay, nothing to compensate for, because it's all voluntary.
Can everyone hear me? Sheikh, you can hear me?
I can. I didn't hear a question. Did you ask?
Okay, no, I did not. So the next question is from Brother Sam Hassan, and it's in reference to Hadith 192. It does not mention travel, but mentions high heat. Can we conclude that if one is outside in the heat for prolonged periods, but not traveling, would it be okay to break the fast?
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be understood here from the wording of the hadith, خرجنا مع رسول الله, we've exited, we've set out with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is an issue of travel. So this hadith is about travel. And the fact that it's a widespread, they're not sitting in Medina. If they're sitting in Medina, they would not be saying we went out. So they're out of Medina, right? If they're just simply sitting around, they wouldn't say we went out with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they're talking about, and the fact is that you have most of them here in Hadith 192, most of them are not fasting. So it's not an area of intense heat in Medina that it caused them all to break their fast. So it is travel. So if they're traveling, they're all allowed to break their fast. So let's say, for instance, if someone is working outside in intense heat, are they allowed to break their fast? And the scholars have said that if a person, and in some Muslim countries, I think that they do give them exemptions. So they could work different hours, or work at night, or decrease the number of hours so that they would it doesn't conflict with their fasting. But let's suppose that it does. They say that a person can start with the intention, the day with the intention that they're going to fast. But if anytime throughout the day where it's going to become unbearable or it's too hard or whatever, then they can break their fast, right? And if with practice, and with habit, they just simply know that there is no way for them, okay, it's become certain to them that there is no way for them to be able to do this job and also fast at the same time. And of course, there's no way for them to move their hours where they could be fasting and working at the same time. Then they may be allowed to break their fast and then fast at a later time. But two things need to happen. First, you need to try it. So you begin the day with, my intention is to fast, and you fast. And you see how the day goes. And maybe that day goes fine and you're okay with it. Maybe the next day, not so much. So you'll test it. But you begin each day with the intention to fast. And after many trials, you find out that no, that this is not possible. There's just no, day after day, with the amount of work that I'm doing, with the heat that is outside, and with all the efforts that I'm trying to kind of remanage my hours, none of that is working. And I need this job and I can't stop working during the month of Ramadan. So it seems that the only option that I have is to break their fast. If that's the case, then you've done your job trying to fast, but you kept failing. And we say, yes, you're exempted from that until such a time later on where the hours are shorter or it's not that hot or you're not working that particular job, then you can fast, inshallah.
So Sheikh, are there any conditions needed to be considered that we are traveling?
Not at all. As long as you are a traveler, as long as, it's a good question, as long as it is considered travel. And that is another area of discussion within Islamic fiqh. What is travel? What is travel? So it has nothing to do with hardship, by the way. You know, you can be traveling and it could be luxurious first-class travel. If it's travel, it's travel, and you can break your fast if you wish. But the discussion there is about the duration and the distance. What constitutes travel or not? So there are some distances where it is very clear for us that this is travel. Get on a plane and you go to a different city. Spend an hour or half an hour or more. That's travel. You go overseas. That's travel. That's definitely travel. You get into your car and start driving, and it's a distance of 40 kilometers, 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers or more. When does it become travel or not? That's where the scholars disagree. So there are two answers I can give to this, just to simplify. The more accurate answer, I believe, but it's a bit ambiguous. It says that whatever people consider to be travel is travel. And whatever people do not consider to be travel, it's not travel, meaning they take it back to custom or consensus or convention, urf. So we know that if you travel from here to Africa, that's travel. If you go here, for instance, from your location about 40 kilometers for work, or maybe 80 kilometers for work, a lot of us don't consider that to be travel. It's just, that's work. I'm just going 80 kilometers to work and coming back within the same day. So they don't consider that travel. So it's not about the specific distance, but what is the convention around us? We call this travel, but we don't call that travel. And some people, add to it, like if you pack things, if you pack clothes, if you pack your toothbrush, if you pack, meaning that it is a journey, right? So that's what they call travel. So it's by convention. The other opinion says, well, it's about distance, and they put 80 kilometers. The advantage of this one, 80 kilometers, the advantage of this one, it gives you a number. So if the first opinion is just too ambiguous, it's not very clear, at least the second opinion tells you, okay, if you travel a distance of more than 80 kilometers, you're a traveler. You can shorten the salah, you can break your fast, etc., etc. So I prefer the first one, but I do go with the second one when it becomes difficult for people to decide. So, inshallah, if more is needed on this, I'll be happy.
So going to Costco and standing in a 2-mile queue is not traveling, alhamdulillah.
No. It's hard, but it's not traveling.
Okay. The next question is from a sister, and it's about getting the rewards for the whole year of fasting. They miss some fast during Ramadan because of the monthly cycle, but they want to first fast the 6 nafil fasting of Shawwal first, and then would like to do, if they can do it after Shawwal, the months that they missed during Ramadan. If they do this, will they get reward for both, or they both have to finish in Shawwal?
Now, wallahu a'lam, they can do that. Now, there are some scholars, and you go online or you ask some scholars, and they will say, no, you have to fast Ramadan first, okay, make up for those missed days first, and then fast Shawwal, which basically tells you that all of it has to be in Shawwal, as the sister has said, because you may need to make up for those days of Ramadan, then the 6 days of Shawwal, and then you're okay. But no, wallahu a'lam, is that you see from the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, is that she used to make up that fast in Sha'ban, okay, because she couldn't. So some scholars have said because of that, he says it's impossible for her to have missed the 6 days of Shawwal, right, and not also have done also the days of Ramadan. Before them, right, because the days of Ramadan came after, and it's impossible for her to have not done the 6 days of Shawwal. But either way, if you're a person who does what? He says, because the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, if you fast Ramadan and you follow that by 6 days of Shawwal, if you miss some days in Ramadan, okay, and we look at you and we ask you, did you fast Ramadan? You say, yeah, I fasted Ramadan, but there are some days where I was exempted from fasting, but I did fast Ramadan. You say, okay, follow it with 6 days of Shawwal. And then when you have the time, inshallah, in Shawwal, if you can, if later, if you can, if you cannot, fast those days of Ramadan. Then when we look at you, what would we say? You fasted Ramadan and you fasted 6 days of Shawwal after. And that actually agrees with the hadith. So you do not contradict the hadith. If you delay the fasting of Ramadan after the 6 days of Shawwal, you'll be able, inshallah, to get the full reward of the whole year, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. I hope this answers the sister's question. Brother Abdul Rahman Al Sayyed is asking a question for a sister, and he has known her for almost 6 years, and she's gone through pregnancy and nursing back to back with 3 babies. What is your advice, Sheikh, on what she can do to make up her fasts?
So too many days, right? That's the question that comes. There are too many days, and she may not be able to make it up. Okay, maybe 1 Ramadan, 2 Ramadans, 3 Ramadans, it had become very difficult, maybe even, for some impossible for them, right, to do that. In that case, right, when these days pile up because of nursing, you pay, if that is within your means, for each day, meaning you feed a poor person for each day, and you would not have to make them up, inshallah. So 30 days, 30 poor people, 60 days, 60 poor people, 90 days, 90 poor people. You feed them, inshallah. You can do it whenever you can. If you're poor and you completely are unable, you cannot feed anybody, then that's fine. There's nothing more on you. If you can feed 20 only, whereas you need to feed 90, but you can only feed 20, and the rest is forgiven, inshallah. So do what you can. But if you have the ability to feed all of those people, feed all those people, and you don't have to fast.
Jazakumullah khair. Another sister has asked a similar question. If you have not fasted the compulsory, so you miss fasting, and the next year Ramadan comes and you have not fasted yet, what will be the amount and options of that fidya? And if someone cannot fast because they're sick, is fidya 2 times meal per day, equal in cash? What is it?
So the last part of the question, if they cannot fast for 2 times?
Because they were sick.
Okay, so they couldn't make up for it the entire year because they were sick, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay, so let's answer it in case there's an excuse and there is no excuse. So if there's an excuse for you, don't worry about paying anything, okay? So let's say, for instance, this Ramadan, and you missed some days, and you couldn't fast any day between this Ramadan and the coming Ramadan because you were sick throughout. Don't worry about any fidya. You just need to make up for those days if you can, okay? So if you have an excuse, don't worry about any fidya. We said only that in a case of neglect, right? In a case where you don't have excuse and you keep delaying it until you come to the next Ramadan and you still have 6 days of the past Ramadan left and you have not fasted that yet, then yes, you have to compensate for it. According to a group of scholars, you have to compensate or pay that fidya. That fidya is feeding a person per day. They call it a mud, right? You would take, food, right? And you would give it to them, whether it's rice, a staple, like rice or flour or whatever. Basically feed a person per day. And some of the masjids and some of these relief organizations, they will have an amount, a set amount. I think Islami do actually as well. They will have a set amount that if there's a fidya, it's such and such number of dollars. And they will take it and they will feed a person. And that will be done, inshallah.
Sister Farhana has the next question. This is about Hadith 197, which was talking about hairs. If we have multiple hairs, will the fast be divided as they would be divided for a wasiyah?
Okay, so if we have multiple ones, okay, multiple heirs, and the fast will be divided according to the wasiyah. It's always a possibility, but it doesn't have to. That is, if any top search result. Okay, no, that's okay. That's wrong. So what I would say is that it doesn't have to be divided. Any one of them who volunteers would be enough. If any one of them is volunteers. If we're talking about a large number of days and you want to divide them, it would make sense, right? That it would divide as an obligation according to who inherited what. So the one who inherited more, if they're capable physically, would fast more, and the one who inherited less would fast less. So that would make sense. But if any one of them volunteers and fasts all of these days, that would be sufficient, right? So as long as any one of them volunteers, that would be enough. But dividing it according to how much each has inherited seems just.
Okay. Sister Shala, I don't understand your question. I will get to the next comment and maybe you can explain that question. It's like a statement here, but I'll just make a comment which Brother Abdul Rahman Al-Sayyid has made. It's a very pertinent comment about Hadith 192, in which he says it's a good example why it's not right for people who are not qualified to interpret Hadith by themselves. That's why we have scholars. So many people would not know what something would refer to, like it refers to travel or something else. So please do ask. Sister Shala, would you like to explain your question? I'm giving you the floor. Okay, she may not be there this time. So let me see if I have any more questions. By the way, we do have 2 shayukhs online as well, Sheikh Ahmad Salim and Sheikh Ibrahim Hindi. Jazakumullah khairan for joining. I don't believe, so Sister Shala is giving a clarification now. Yes, if you are in inheritance, so you're the heir of someone owing fast while you yourself are owing some fast from pregnancy, is it possible to alternate them?
Okay, so you make up your own as you are also helping them by making up their fast. So to alternate them. If it is and whenever it is possible, right? Do yours first and then do theirs second. if it's possible, right? So do yours first and do theirs second, because you're responsible first before your own debt. So do your own debt first, and then go ahead and help them with their own debt whenever that is possible, right? So that's what I would recommend, inshallah. Do yours and then do theirs.
Jazakumullah khairan. We, mashallah, covered all the questions. If there are any more questions in anything that you have missed asking, please do email, or I'll be on this chat for another 5-7 minutes. You can put it in. Sheikh, any final remarks? We are at 120. We did say that we will end at 120. Inshallah, we are right on dot. Any final comments before we end?
Inshallah, just bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, let me know bi'idhnillah if there is anything that was not clear, so that we can clarify it. Any points that we did not cover, so I would cover it, inshallah. Any area that you find typically is confusing to people when it comes to fasting, or an issue of debate or an issue of concern, inshallah, so that we can address it in a way that bi'idhnillah azza wa jal would bring ease and comfort to people. So that's the first, inshallah. Helpful, inshallah, if you're sitting there, take notes whenever you can, so that you'll remember whatever has been said. It's likely that some of these things that we'll be talking about in a week or 2 or 3, we're going to forget them. But if you write it down and take good notes, inshallah, you can come back to it later. And it could answer a question that you had that you did not think about then, but you'll find the answer to it, inshallah, in the notes that you have taken. So take notes. It's always a good practice whenever you're listening to a lecture, whenever you're attending a halaqah, that to have a notebook with you and to keep taking notes. It will cement the information, inshallah, and will allow you even to think about it later on. And you will be asked, inshallah, even more and deeper questions, inshallah. And that is it, inshallah. I hope all of you are safe and all of you are adjusting well to your stay at home, and consider it also to be, in a sense, a kind of worship, right? Because you are staying home, and by that you're protecting others. So there are those among us who have to exit and maybe risk their lives trying to help. And the best thing that you can do protecting them is to stay at home, protecting yourself and your family. And you do it with that intention, inshallah, and you actually, it becomes a ibadah, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, when it's done for the sake of Allah. So may Allah azza wa jal make it easy, and be as kind as you can, because this is the way that you will receive Allah's kindness, inshallah. That's it.
Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.